Let me tell you what my experience is seeing the Rainbow Room at Child Protective Services in Texas. It was filthy. There was trash on the floor, bits and pieces of food and crumbs on the couch, under the cushions. On the floor itself, the furniture was dusty, the tables were sticky from drinks being spilled on them. There were VHS tapes filling drawers and a dresser underneath the television that was in the visitation room. None of them were rewound. There were broken toys filling the toy box. There's a broken computer and a broken stereo in there with speaker wires that were torn out. There was no trash can, and it was clear that at the time that I visited, it was badly neglected. They didn't even send housekeeping in there. And one of the worst things is that in the old building that they were using at the time, the central air would not distribute heat evenly throughout the building, and the heater, the thermostat, was right outside the room. So to warm the outside offices, the workers would turn the thermostat up to 95 degrees. And visiting families where the heat would discharge initially very near to that room or in that room, it would roast those people during the wintertime. It would be so hot for that hour because the outside offices were cold and they would jack up the thermostat that it would be almost intolerable. Just imagine sitting directly in the sun and you're being roasted along with your children while you are visiting them in a filthy, cramped room filled with broken toys and sticky, dirty floors and furniture. Seeing kids get off the floor in the Rainbow Room, their hands, their feet, and their legs would be dirty just from touching those surfaces. I'm talking to the point that they had to be wiped and washed down. And nobody's kids and no parent should be having to visit their children in an environment that's like that. That's what social services is doing to families in Texas and other states across the United States. Those parents whose children end up in foster care end up with their kids only being able to see them for 1 hour per week if they're not in a family placement. And it's disgusting. Parents are having to miss work. They're having to travel 40 or 50 miles one way, sometimes, or more, to go to where the Rainbow Rooms are located so that they can have a visitation for 1 hour. And this is happening in cases where the kids are as young as just a few days or a few months old. And that's absolute madness. They would expect a couple that just had a baby to only be able to see their baby for 1 hour a week. That's evil. I've heard and seen these situations so many times. I'm speaking out against the injustice because I can't take it anymore. Things have to change. The agency has to change how they operate. What they're doing to families is wrong. And they're engaging in wrongful removals and unlawful searches, and they're engaging in constitutional violations and harassment against families. And the placements that they're taking kids to when they're placing them in state care are like what I'm about to describe to you. I know I started out talking about the Rainbow Rooms, but I want to talk a little bit about foster placements too. They place the children in neglectful and abusive homes after taking them from homes that are not neglectful and abusive. They'll take kids out of a clean house for something like a lack of child care for 45 minutes or an hour, or could even be less than that. Maybe the kids were allowed to go to the store or something, half mile away. You live in a small town or something. Somebody called the police and said that the person's underage and they're out there alone without supervision, going to the store in town a mile or two away from their family's home. I heard of a woman getting arrested for that in one place. These foster placements that they put them in, they're dirty. They'll put 6 kids under the care of one single parent foster care provider. They will lock children in the rooms inside the foster placement home without furniture on dirty floors. They'll crank up the AC so that it's bordering on hot, so that it's uncomfortable inside the foster placement. And rather than feeding them full meals, they'll give them things like animal crackers and plain water and just leave them locked in a room all day at the foster home. You won't know where they are. You won't know how to get a hold of the foster mother or what their name is, or foster parent, whoever it is. You won't even know what town the foster placement is in. You won't know about what the conditions are like, if it's clean or dirty. You won't know what kind of clothes the kids are being given to wear, what they're being fed, what they're eating and drinking, if anybody around them is dangerous. You won't know the names of any of the people that are in the placement with them, whether it's the kids or the adults. And that means you won't be able to run criminal background checks on the placement providers. And the state does nothing to supervise. For instance, they'll let a baby that's been placed in foster care sit in a dirty diaper all day in a foster placement, in a foster home. Okay, to the point that the baby has lesions on their privates from being left in an unsanitary diaper filled with waste for hours and hours on end. And then the foster care provider will not face any charges for that. Whereas if a parent did that, the parent would go to jail. The parent would be arrested. That's completely unethical. It's illegal. That goes to show you that the removals are financially motivated, and that the state, whatever state that it is that's allowing it to happen, does not give a shit about the children. The removals are meant to generate revenue for the court system, the family courts, and the local government. Because for every child that they take, the welfare office, child welfare agency, gets a large bonus, and they get a monthly allotment in addition to that initial bonus that is paid for each child that they have in state care. And the kids that come out of those situations come out of it far, far worse off if they survive. They'll experience injury, sexual assault, physical abuse, neglect, malnourishment, and be around dangerous people when they're in foster care. I'm going to provide one more example here before I cap this off. There was a young African-American woman in Children Without Placement housing. She was staying in a hotel or motel somewhere in the Houston area, and she asked a social worker for food. She said, I'm hungry, please get me food. And keep in mind, she's underage, she's not old enough to work, and she's in foster care. But she doesn't have a family that she's placed with. She's living in a hotel or motel by herself. Her mom, said that she was having some issues with her. So the social worker tells the young woman that she needs to go prostitute herself for food. I'm not going to name anybody here, but, in any circumstance, that is completely unacceptable. And obviously the social worker got fired, but that's not my point. Social services traffics a lot of the children that are in state care, and probably something like 350 a year. I think that was the last number I heard. It was like 348 to be more exact. Are experiencing sex trafficking in state care, in state conservatorship. Now ask yourself, if they hadn't been taken in the first place from the homes that they were in, and the families have been given financial support and medical assistance, free health care, housing assistance, utilities assistance, etc., and job training assistance so they could have vocational skills to better provide for their families, the parents could. Would it even be necessary to deal with all the other crap to begin with? The increased risk, the risk of neglect and abuse and sexual exploitation in state conservatorship? No, it wouldn't. But you see, the state doesn't want to help families. The state wants to exploit them. It wants to make money off of families. And it's only people who have lived it, or they've read the stories, or talked to people who have been through it and seen firsthand what's happening, that understand just how corrupt the states are. Especially Texas. Texas by far is one of the most neglectful and abusive states because the government just wants to make money off everybody. They want to tax the hell out of everybody. And if they can't tax you through citations and tickets, they're going to tax you by making you go to court and pay a bunch of money for bullshit services that don't make you a better parent. They don't make you provide better for anybody. They detract from actual being able to provide for anyone or get a degree. They're going to put a bunch of bullshit, arbitrary demands on you that aren't going to make anything better for anyone. Like making you watch videos about toxic culture from the 1970s. That doesn't apply today. All these things are hoops. And people aren't served by it. You know, getting people off of drugs and alcohol, if they're on drugs and alcohol, I can understand. But parents are arbitrarily assigned all these bullshit requirements that they have to engage in to get their children back. And it comes to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars in lost wages and time lost at work or at school or both, and wear and tear on your car. And the whole process, when you deal with the system, does not make you a better parent, not in any capacity. You know, maybe for somebody who needs to get clean, like if they're on alcohol or drugs, but if you're not doing that, you just need financial assistance. And they put you in a process where you're dealing with social services for a year or 2 years or more. They're not helping you, they're expensing you. That's taxation. And they don't help. They don't help with utilities, they don't help with housing costs, they don't help with any of your costs. They might bring you some food from the food bank or something, and maybe some clothing if you have, you know, children that have been in state care or conservatorship. But they're not going to give you any practical financial support that actually helps pay your bills. They are going to expense you, and they're going to make things worse. And you'll come away from it, if you have to pay out of pocket, you'll come away from it with tens of thousands of dollars in costs, and it will set you back permanently by many, many years. If you ever are able to recover, you're going to be set back so much. It's going to be such a wounding experience, so devastating, that it's very unlikely that you or your family will ever recover. That's why I make videos like this, because I'm trying to reform how the system works. I know people who have been through the system. I have seen it. I have spoken to these people. I know people who have lived it. I have seen why people's kids get taken. I've spoken to victims of the system. I've spoken to people who were abused in foster care. And I've seen how the social workers operate. And they have entirely too much free reign as far as what procedures they're allowed to observe, constitutional observances or lack thereof, the processes they follow are not regulated. They operate almost entirely without oversight, and they end up hurting families more than anything else. And people who need legitimate help when they ask for it, they don't get it. You know, I've seen it. I've seen single parents ask for housing assistance, food assistance, you know, utility assistance for their electric bills, their gas bill, transportation costs, etc. They're not getting that assistance out there. And it's getting even worse, you know, under the Trump administration. It's getting worse, much worse. It's like it's just another way to make money off of people. And everybody comes out of it worse off than they were going in. And that's how you know that it's no good. That's how you know that the system is broken as it is. Things need to be worked on, it needs to be repaired. Thank you for listening to me and for watching this video. And I talk about many topics on this channel, but I'm hoping that by sharing my insights and perspective that I can make changes on behalf of other people who are going through situations